How are you guys? Welcome back to Wargaming China. And here we are at Hei Fei Station, or Hei Fei Station, south of Xuzhou, about 3 stops short of Tengshan Station or Xuzhou Station on the Jinpu Railway line. And what we have happening is there's a Japanese lorried infantry regiment and tank battalion, the 5th Tank Battalion of the RGA's 3rd Infantry Division. Now, how is it that we are here today? Because a month ago, on the 7th of April, we were celebrating a Chinese victory at Taiyuan, where the culmination of a battle where Japanese forces approaching Xuzhou in 3 independent formations, but all intent on seizing Taiyuan as the stepping stone to Xuzhou, were defeated by the 7th of April, and great Chinese strategic victory was declared and achieved. So how is it that by May the 14th, the Japanese are pushing on Xuzhou? Well, they're pushing on Xuzhou because the Japanese army never sat idle. And after the Chinese victory at Taiyuan on the 7th of April 1938, the RGA had not sat idle. It knew that the Chinese forces were still in the fight would find it hard to coordinate against a fresh push on Xuzhou. So they took 2 independent brigades from the Kwantung Army and shuffled forces from Field Marshal Shunroku Hata's Central China Expeditionary Force and from Field Marshal Hisashi Turachi's North China Front Army. Now, the Japanese would muster about 400,000 men for this operation to seize Xuzhou once and for all, so that they could begin the push on Wuhan. Now, if we recall, the Japanese had assembled a force of 120,000 to push from the north, northeast and the south, with the RGA 13th Division having been halted on the Huai River. It was then relieved by the 3rd and 9th Infantry Divisions of the Central China Expeditionary Force of Field Marshal Hata. Now, the 3rd Division was a crack division, and it would push north up the Jinpu track, up the Jinpu Railway line. You see, although fighting on the Huai River had ceased by the February the 20th, the 3rd Division's arrival had reinvigorated the Japanese push on Xuzhou from the south. So what we have here is we have 1 lorried infantry regiment and 1 Japanese armed battalion. Now, the armed battalion is not right, tank battalion is not right, should only be Otsus, Type 89s, and I think there was 38 Otsus and 12 Type 94 tankettes to the 5th Battalion. Now, Chinese forces in the town. Well, Chinese forces in the town. Well, let me put it like this. We all know that success has many fathers and that failure is an orphan. So although I could tell you into great detail about all the forces I had so far put up and made the Battle of Taizhuang happen, the fall of Xuzhou, I failed to find which Chinese formation was holding Hei Fei. I believe it could be part of the 20th Army, but I'm not too sure. So I went for Northeastern Army soldiers, and I gave them a very, very, very disparate mix of equipment as usual. As you know, disparate is one of the words I love to use to describe my Chinese forces. And there's 2 battalions holding a town, and when this town falls, Xuzhou will fall by the 21st of May. So this will be the final scenario in the Xuzhou Campaign, and I hope you've enjoyed it. The battle for Xuzhou itself, although the city was heavily bombed, Lai Zongren had already started the evacuation by the time this town, Hei Fei, fell. Now, I might ramble here on a bit more, so if you're interested in that, piss off. If you are, pause now and get yourself a drink. Now, if we look back at the River Huai, it had taken the Japanese 3rd Division about a month of heavy fighting to be able to push north to the town of Pizhou. But then by the 14th it found itself here at Hei Fei. Now this is where there was stiff Chinese resistance, but these guys know that these soldiers would have known that although they do, how can I put this? After the victory at Taizhuang, within a month, there were no more supplies arriving for Lai Zongren's armies. The strategic, let's go back to success has many fathers. So if we look at the Battle of Taizhuang, we would say that there are a lot of people who claim responsibility for it. The Chinese Communist Party claims that Zhou Enlai went to see Lai Zongren and said, you know what, Taizhuang's the best place. And Lai Zongren went, oh yeah, bloody hell, you're right, we should do that. That's a official Chinese Communist line. But there is a faction that said, no, Bai Chongzhi is the main brains behind it. But as we all know, it was the actual fighting soldier, the Chinese provincial armies, warlord forces, clique forces, that had sacrificed themselves for the Chinese victory at Taizhuang. And these forces now were in a bit of disarray. Their logistics were tattered. They hadn't been getting any fresh resupplies because remember, now this whole battle had been fought to gain time for an army of 800,000 men to be trained at Wuhan for the defense of Wuhan. So there was no more fresh equipment coming for this army. Only the Japanese. So what equipment there was, whatever could have been gotten away was being getting away because the defense of Wuhan was coming up. But for a lot of pieces of equipment, it would be lost here in this final fighting around Xuzhou. The Chinese would lose a lot of equipment. Now, if you look at the fields around the table, all the crops are in harvest. Now this is important because if you were playing defensively this game, I want you to remember that Lai Zongren wasn't a heartless man, and he also wasn't stupid. The crops needed to be gathered. He needed to get as much time as possible to get these crops in, because the Chinese people were if this ground fell to the Japanese, these supplies wouldn't reach the Chinese people. So it had to, so there was no burning of crops by the Chinese forces. They realised how bad the peasants had it. But also Lai Zongren knew that he wouldn't be able to hold Xuzhou from the fresh Japanese operation. So he actually needed these crops for another reason. Now, he actually does manage to get most of his forces away. When they captured Xuzhou on the 21st, the Japanese capture about 30,000 people, including civilians, including military personnel and civilians. The city's pretty much abandoned. And the army, what it does is it heads for Wuhan, but it only marches at night, and during the day, the army will hide in the crops from Japanese air observation. Now that might sound like a very hard thing to do if you're a modern army with all that equipment, but these Chinese forces are very lightly equipped. So they're traveling at night, and during the day, they hide in the crops, because they can rely the president's not going to tell. The Chinese presidents are very loyal. They don't talk to the Japanese invaders. Of course, they're always quislings. But what's going to happen now with these forces now that have retreated and pulled back successfully? Now, this is where we're going to start to see one of the nails finally going into the coffins of the provincial armies. Because after these armies are rebuilt, and many of them will be rebuilt, they're not going to be recruits that were trained by the provincial governments. They'll be government troops, sworn allegiance to Chang, the government, and eventually all of these forces will become government formations, simply because casualties and supplies, as they must be coming from the government now, including the men, the recruits. So the recruits that swore allegiance to the warlord are very thin on the ground by now. So let's look at the battle. In the first part of the campaign, the Japanese, in the whole campaign, the Japanese put in 400,000 men between the fighting on the Qi River and the fighting of the Tianzang. I'm going to get my playlist sorted out, and then I'll put this all in order on a playlist. But the Chinese had about 600,000 men. Lai Zongren had, by Zhongzi, he had 600,000 men. By the end of this, they're probably down to about 400,000. They probably lost 200,000 casualties. Japanese, all in all, they've put into the pot about 400,000 men. And with all the fighting, including the battles before and after Taizhuang, they've probably lost about 70 to 100,000 casualties. Now, I want to remind you that many of these will be diseases and will be medical issues, disease, but many will be combat losses. And as I said, Lai Zongren will retreat from here, but his armies will stay intact because they're very lightly equipped. But their definition, their flavouring, their uniqueness will all start to be watered down now as they become government troops. But that's not to say that we've finished with the provincial armies, because we certainly have not finished with the provincial armies. We've got a lot more to see from them. But it's just like the provinces like Sichuan, especially Sichuan, when the government has to retreat from Wuhan, it will retreat to Chongqing, and that's in Sichuan. And that amount of government forces, government administration, government personnel in the Sichuan clique will finally put to bed any aspirations of the clique warlords for any kind of autonomy. And for the Japanese, the fall of Xuzhou is a wonderful thing, because now they managed to get all their forces together, win a month in, because they control so much of the railroads. Now their control of the railroads is complete. They can link up from north to south. So what are we to do? What does this battle trigger? This battle will now trigger Chang to blow the dikes on the Yellow River in June, releasing the Yellow River flood. And this will cut off the Japanese for so many things, and it will buy time for the defense of Wuhan. That the fall of Xuzhou is the trigger for Chang to blow the dikes on the Yangtze. And but this fighting will also now lead to other fighting that we've already talked about on the channel, which will lead us back to the Jialing campaign. Now, Jialing campaign is I've got to build a few mountains for, but mountains aren't too difficult. I think I've had an idea for them, so that'll be coming along soon. So that, gentlemen, is the end of the Xuzhou campaign. I'm going to start playing this game now. I hope to get about, we'll go for 10 turns to seize the railway station. The railway station's the target. And let me see what I've forgotten. Yeah, I've told you the Hargo shouldn't be on the table. It should be Otsu's. I just had fun with the Chinese support weapons. I put so many different ones in, because I thought, well, this is where the army's trapped now. It can't move its supplies anywhere. Whatever it's got here, we'll have to lose in combat or lose in retreat. And this should be a good battle. And I'll do a after action report. I've had a few subscribers. Thanks, guys. A few more is always welcome. Press like, give us a comment. It helps the algorithms. One last trip around the table. Now that's a homemade Vickers Twin 50. In there, you got a. You can see that. Yeah, it's a Type 11, Type 13 37mm gun. 82mm mortars. Oerlikon. Type 14. 120mm howitzer. And that's all that's in there. Alright guys, well, I hope you like that. See ya.